It's Thursday, September 12th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today on the show, the politics of fish and what those decisions can mean. We're asking you, what do you think about the decision to lift the cod moratorium? What are your thoughts on how fisheries are being managed? Full call in, folks. The lines are open. All right, so I've got a couple guests I'm going to introduce now shortly who've got their own thoughts on what we're talking about today. And also, we want to hear from you. So let me just give a bit of context for the discussion, right? So back in June, 32 years after the federal government announced a moratorium that shut down the province's cod industry, Fisheries Minister Diane Leboutillier announced it was reopening. The federal government described it as the, quote, historic return of the commercial northern cod fishery, unquote. So that was June. Fast forward to this month, there's been more news on this. First reported by news website All Newfoundland Labrador. Also, there's been reporting by my Radio Canada colleague, Patrick Butler. Here's Patrick's lead in his online article. Federal Fisheries Minister Diane Leboutillier ignored the advice of staff within her department when she reopened the commercial cod fishery in June. A briefing note dated May 9 reveals that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans recommended maintaining the long-time moratorium on northern cod based on scientific evidence, but that political advisors within the minister's office argued reopening the commercial fishery and hiking quotas would be, quote, politically a victory, unquote. The article goes on to describe how NL Liberal caucus was united on going ahead with the commercial fishery. So that's just some of the background here. There's more to it. We can dig into that through the full 5 minutes. And again, we're asking you for your thoughts. What do you think about the decision to lift the moratorium? What are your thoughts on fisheries management? The numbers to call, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can text us, 709-327-8206, or email us, thesignal@cbc.ca. My guests in the studio, President-elect FFAW Dwan Street and Alberto Wareham, the Chief Executive Ice Water Seafoods, Inc., a processing plant in Arnold's Cove. How are you both doing?
Good.
Great.
All right. Alberto, let's start with you. So the news comes out. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, for us at Icewater, I guess we've been waiting 32 years for this moment.
Yeah,
We're
right.
the only fish plant in Newfoundland that's solely focused on cod. The only one in North America for that we know of year-round on Atlantic cod. So, we've made significant investments through the years. We kept the plant open after the moratorium by producing, frozen at sea cod that we're importing from Russia or Norway before the cod started to come back locally. And now, as the cod comes back locally, we'll focus on that and we'll decrease our purchases of frozen at sea cod from other countries. So it's great news for us. Really looking forward to the future.
All through all these years, eh? Still going.
Yes.
That we can talk more about that later in the show, but it's quite the thing. Dwan, what's your perspective from hearing from some of the members within the union?
I think it was an absolutely disgraceful decision. Our members in the inshore, of course, are the ones who have nursed this stock back to health since 1992, and were the ones sounding the alarm long before that northern cod was in trouble. And, given that there is no black and white threshold when the fishery should be moved to commercial, we were taken aback by the decision and also a little bit flabbergasted that the Liberal government has gone back on their promise that actually stemmed from back in 1979 and solidified in 1982, that the first 115,000 metric tons of northern cod would be allocated to inshore fisheries and Indigenous harvesters as well. So, our members are feeling betrayed, upset, and wondering where we go from here.
So what is it that's upsetting about it?
The going back on that 115,000 metric ton commitment, first of all, there are obviously significant concerns when it comes to allowing dragging technologies back on that stock, whether that be domestic or international, which we are seeing with the NAFO. What government will tell you is a NAFO obligation, but is only an obligation that comes into play when that terminology changes from stewardship to commercial. So, we have all of those concerns that we're dealing with right now, and of course we have filed a federal court injunction on the decision. and we're watching that process play out.
Albert, I was going to say, because we were talking before, I know there's certain things you both agree on, and then there's daylight between both of you on some other bits. So just talk to me about, from what Dewan's saying there, from your perspective.
Well, I guess, first of all, the minister was given 3 options, right?
Yeah.
And the minister did select one of the 3 options that was provided. I think Dewan and I can both agree that, of the 3 options that was provided, the quantities of between 13,000 and 18,000 tons was not appropriate based on the science that we have. I mean, in the fall of 2023, we had a revised assessment model with inputs that showed us that the result was that the stock was now in the cautious zone out of the critical zone. But more importantly, for us, we had a fall survey in 2023. We received the results in March of 2024, which confirmed that the stock was in the cautious zone for the last 8 years. And you manage a fishery different in the cautious zone or in the critical zone. So for us, the decision to move commercial with the science was the right decision. And I guess then we get into who gets the fish and who shares the fish. I think that's one of the major issues. But I mean, all the people, like there were advisory meetings on this. I mean, this is not done in a vacuum.
Yeah.
So, we were there, the FAW was there, the provincial government was there, other industry stakeholders were there. And everybody in the fishing industry, whether you're a fish processor or fish harvesters, recommended, based on the latest science, between 20 and 26,000 ton removal. And the minister went with 18.
Yeah. Now, with that initial recommendation, total allowable catch, 13,000 tons, same level, 2022, 2023, the point was if you do more than that, there could be an increase to the stock's risk of decline. The other 2 options, for context for folks, reopening a commercial fishery, a total allowable catch of 15,000 tons with quotas distributed solely among inshore and indigenous fish harvesters, and the other, reopening a commercial fishery with a total allowable catch of 18,000 tons, allowing the return of offshore vessels more than 100 feet long. And this is where we get into that NAFO bit and some of the mechanisms there. But what was the ask from everyone locally for the allowable catch, without talking about stewardship to commercial? What was the tonnage that everyone was asking for regardless of this?
And Alberto and I had this conversation. We all did agree that the tax should be higher than 18,000. Industry did ask between 20 and 26,000. And we felt the stock could handle a harvest of around 25,000. That would also provide more work to our members in Alberto's plant, because of course icewater workers are FFAW uniform members as well, and would allow a longer and again still sustainable harvest on the stock, because the science was much more positive and the stock is in the cautious zone. With the revamping of the model, it actually showed that the stock has been in a much healthier state since 2016 than DFO had alluded. So we felt it was a great opportunity to provide more harvesting opportunities and processing opportunities in our coastal communities, and to still maintain that fishery as a stewardship fishery.
And Adam, if I could add just another point or two. We have our customers are primarily UK, France, some in North America, primarily UK and France. That's the largest single market for premium quality cod. That's our main business. And they have sustainability requirements, sustainability standards, right? So we have an NGO partner that we work with, and we work with that partner to come up with what was a sustainable level that we could recommend. And the result for us was 25,600, not much different than the FAW. And that met our customers' standards. So we were comfortable presenting that. And if the minister had selected that, we could still say it's a sustainable decision based on science.
Okay. Well, we've been chumming the waters a bit for this call-in. So, folks, if you want to add your thoughts, your opinions to this conversation that we're having right now, you can give us a call, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Text us, 709-327-8206, or email us thesignal@cbc.ca. And again, we're asking, what do you think about the decision to lift the cod moratorium? Ed's on the line from St. John's. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, like many Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, I guess I vividly remember where I was and what I was doing on July the 2nd, 1992, when the cod moratorium was announced. Probably at work, but I know we were all listening to radios at the time and then watching TV vividly that evening, because we had some idea of what the impact would be upon all Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. The question I have is actually to Mr. Wareham. With the opening of a commercial cod fishery, how do we ensure we do not repeat the mistakes of the past? What do we need to do differently today to ensure a sustainable and prosperous cod fishery that's in the best interests of all the province and all the people of Newfoundland and Labrador?
All right, I'll put that question. Thanks for the question, Ed, for getting things started. Much appreciated. I'll put the question to both the guests. Thoughts?
Okay, I guess first I would start with science, right? We need DFO to have the best available science. They need to invest more in fishery science, right? To give us the best robust science we can. So we got to make science-based decisions. That's number one. Second, we've got to focus on quality. So we worked with the FAW back in 2014. Many of your callers are probably not aware, listeners, that we now grade every fisherman's landing based on quality, and are paid based on quality. And when we started that program in 2014, the average grade in August for cod was 65% grade A, and that was 92% grade A. So in 10 years, we've moved the ball significantly. And for us, the reason quality is so important is we compete with the top cod-producing nations of the world and the top producers in Iceland and Norway. And we have the freshest frozen cod produced anywhere in the world, right? Because we're producing within 24 to 48 hours of catch from the inshore dayboat fishery, right? We don't have a lot of volume, but we're competing on quality. So one of our customers, like Marks & Spencer, for example, we're a significant supplier of them, of their cod requirements, competing with the top brands in Iceland because of quality. So for us, it's science, quality, and then focusing on premium markets.
What do we mean by quality? Like, what does that mean?
Well, for us, it's several things. First of all, getting it landed as quickly as possible, but handling it properly on the boat, right? It starts in the boat. If the fishermen do the best job they can, they're giving us the best opportunity with our people and our technology to produce the best quality. So that gets you a premium price.
So if I'm in France and I'm expecting the quality that I expect, when I take a look at the fish that I've bought, that's coming from your plant, what do I expect to see that should be on par with everywhere else to get that top grade quality? Like, it
should be white, have firm texture, and a very good taste.
Right. Okay. And what have we changed with how we handle things to make, what's the difference been with the handling?
So what we've done, and the FAW have worked with us through the years. So when we started this model in 2014, we came up with a price for grade A, B, and C. We've never changed the price of B and C since 2014. We've only changed the price of A to focus on quality. So this year, if you land a grade A product, you get $1.05 at the wharf. You land B, you get 40, and C, you get 20. We're trying to encourage fishermen. We don't want B and C. We want all A. There will be some B and C. We understand that. A lot of 85% of the cod in Newfoundland today is still landed with a gill net. And, people are getting 100% with gill nets. That's possible. But you will get potential for some lower grades with gill nets. But we're still at 92% grade A on average. So, I don't want to focus on that. What I want to focus on is that, it starts in the boat. So if the fishermen do the best job they can, they're going to get the top grade, and that allows us to have the best raw material to compete with Iceland and Norway.
John, thoughts then? Just that question that I was asking about, make sure we don't repeat history and what happened.
I agree with Alberto that the onus is on us to keep DFO's feet to the fire when it comes to science, because we've had far too many years with vessel breakdowns and surveys not being completed. And, when there are gaps in that data set, it's hard to have faith in the science. And, northern cod is the poster child of collapse. So every eye in the world is on that stock and has been since 1992. And at FFAW, of course, we've had our sentinel fishery, which it's an input into the model as well, to see what harvesters are seeing on the water in their local areas. That's a province-wide program, not only on northern cod. And we try to work closely with DFO to ensure that the science is something that we can have faith in, which when we talk about the recommendations to the minister, Alberto's right. None of those numbers are ones that any of us would have been happy with, because we feel the science indicated there could have been a higher harvest on the stock and to still remain sustainable. So I think our concerns, as I stated earlier, are with the introduction of draggers back on the stock. Ed mentioned that he remembers the moratorium. I grew up just outside Bonavista, and I was 10 years old when the moratorium happened, right? So we're moratorium babies.
Yeah.
We remember that devastation and what that meant in the province. I mean, it was the largest layoff in Canadian history. And there are still communities in our province that have never recovered. There are still families that will never be back to our province because of what happened then. And, our memories, we remember that, and we fear that happening again. And when it was the inshore harvesters that were sounding the alarm bells, and the ones that were saying, we see what we see on the water and the damage that's being done by these technologies, because our concern, of course, is that dragger technologies are not selective. And it's a much higher catch rate than an inshore harvester, whether it's a hook and line or a gill net, and that fear is there. So, when you have harvesters who have babied and nursed this stock for 30 years, and all of a sudden the door is open again, and the fear is there that we're just going to repeat the mistakes of the past and, devastate our coastal communities again, it's not something that we take very lightly.
If I could add a couple of things to that, I guess, just going back to Ed's question, the other thing we need to do is extend the season, like more throughout the year, like for our workers and for the plant and for our markets. I mean, we need to be producing northern cod, whether it's inshore, offshore, for 8 to 10 months a year. I mean, if you're supplying something like Marks & Spencer, it's no better from Sobeys or Loblaws, whoever, they need product 12 months of the year. You're not going to get a significant part of their business if you don't have cod to supply them for, the majority of the year. And the other thing, I guess, back to Dewan's comment about draggers, but I mean trawling. So in Iceland and Norway, we have 50 to 60% of the fish being caught by draggers. I mean, technology is very different today. Fisheries management is very different, and fisheries monitoring is very different. So it's a different world than it was in the 80s.
So how much with this announcement? How much will be caught offshore now? What's the percentage?
Well, I guess in the Canadian allocation, there's 1,080 tons to be caught offshore.
So like 5% or something, isn't it?
6%.
6%.
The inshore has 84%, I believe, right? I mean, here's the reality of the inshore fishery. It's because, the fish are in the inshore, they follow the Capeland in, they're after spawning. We were catching about 500 tons a day in the commercial inshore cod fishery this year. So, in a week we were doing about 2,200 metric tons. We had, Sunday, Monday, our season opened on Sunday. We had our best days, probably at 500 tons a day for, so in a couple of days we were catching 1,000 tons, to put it in perspective.
We've got another caller on the line. And folks, so we're talking about the decision to lift the cod moratorium. There's been media coverage around this in the last couple of weeks. We want your thoughts here on the signal today. We're asking, what are your thoughts on the lifting of the moratorium? And also, more broadly, what are your thoughts on fisheries management off of our coasts? I've got two guests with me here in studio. I'm Adam Walsh, of course, your host. We've got President-elect of the FFAW, Dewan Street, and Alberto Wareham, the Chief Executive of Ice Water Seafoods, Inc., a fish processing plant in Arnold's Cove. We've got John on the line from Torbay. Hi.
Hello there. Hello, everybody. Hello, Newfoundland and Labrador, you beautiful souls.
What are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I was involved as a volunteer with the Rural Development Associations when this went down, and I can remember Dr. Glover, or was it Glover? All he managed to get was page 3, and his report talked about the increase in suicides, suspicious deaths, drownings, and fires in the part of society, our society, any society, that is the foundation. Young men in their 30s with families. When they couldn't, what happened to us is nothing short of a cultural genocide that was perpetrated on a trusting people and tore families apart, like I sat at one wake, it radicalized me. I was sitting at a kitchen table with the kids, and they were looking at an empty chair. And what cost the overfishing? My grandfather out of Kite Cove, he talked about they were going to decimate the cod back in the 60s. They didn't listen to traditional knowledge until the circumpolar people had it finally implemented. And to ask us to trust them, and what's the value added? It's the greatest protein out there. But there's a lot of questions that need to be asked about fisheries management, and it means that at terms of reference, not coming to us and say, this is what we're going to do. That's not consultation. You start at the terms of reference, and you make sure somebody's at the table that is not being paid either by the industry, the union, or somebody else. Somebody that can honestly represent the cod. I know that there's people suffering for decades, and scientists that I know that is suffering from PTSD from what happened, and it's not good enough to just willy-nilly come and list this. You put the trawlers in the bays. Yeah, the bays are full. Put the trawlers in the bays. If they wanted to, they'd clear it up in 3 weeks. So fool me once. Fool me 100 years of it, but not anymore.
John, thank you so much for your thoughts on this. I'll bring it back to my guests, and I appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked already in this hour just about what happened, right, in 92 and what that meant. Just so you can look at the population decline, the rural decline, the decline in this province, and the impact that we're still feeling today from this. Right. And now there's the talk, John mentioned science there, right? So there's also this quote from a recent CBC story. This is from George Rose, longtime fisheries scientist based in British Columbia. He said, I did not and do not believe that DFO science would recommend the policy put forth by the minister. There's a long history with this and other Canadian fisheries of politics trumping science. Our fisheries continue to suffer. So that's from George Rose. Now he's living in British Columbia now, but 40 years studying cod. But then we've got our science discussion. So are there any thoughts on either what the George Rose comment, science, or some of what John was saying there?
I can speak first, I guess, on what John was saying. I guess, the fool me once, fool me twice. I mean, our company, myself, our business, we don't want this to be a short-term decision, short-term, gain. We want this for the long term. We've been waiting 32 years, so we want to do it right, for our business, for our customers. DFO science today is peer reviewed, right? So it's not only DFO science in the room. I mean, they do bring in outside experts to review their assessments. And I think they did that in October with the assessment model. It was peer reviewed. So, I mean, they do have other people looking at their work to ensure that it does meet international standards. And I mean, Canada, when we do the surveys, I think we should say that we have some of the best science, in the world for fisheries. But it's based on, we got to do the surveys. And we dropped the ball on that for about 2 to 3 years in a row. We're just getting back this year. And, one of the things last year, I mean, the survey was done 4 to 6 weeks early based on its historic time. And we think if the survey this year, we need the survey done more in historic time. Science always likes comparing what they're seeing now with the past. Yeah. So if we can get the survey done in a similar time period, then there'll be more confidence in the results. And we believe we might see more fish out there than did last year.
Is part of the conversation then around, because and I'll go back to it again, that initial recommendation from DFO in that briefing note talking, because they gave the options, right? But that saying, 13,000 tons, same level, 2022, 2023, and then you had the 15,000, the 18,000, which they went with. We've got the, 20 to 25, somewhere in that range for what some of industry wanted. Is it a risk factor acceptance? Because we're all talking different recommendations, but you got a baseline from DFO looking at risk. And is it a risk factor thing for what either the union and some of the processes are looking at? Where are we with it from that discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think fisheries management always has some degree of risk management in there, right?
Yeah.
And I know even though science might not have agreed with our 20 to 25,000 metric ton recommendation, I think it also is important to point out that science is now saying that the stock was healthier in 2016 than it actually they had indicated. So, I think the catch could have been a bit higher back then. And, nobody wants to take the stock and overfish it right now. Everybody wants to make sure it's being done in a sustainable manner. And like Alberto said, it's not going to do us any favors in the marketplace either if we just go hammer a stock. But, I think it's awful checks and balances. And when it comes to science, it's been very disappointing with the years that we've missed the survey, or the survey's been done at off times because, like Alberto said, you need a data set that's comparable year over year. You need to be comparing apples to apples, right? And we haven't had that for a few years. I know there were issues with the Teleos. DFO seems to be in a much better place now. So hopefully going forward, we can have a solid time series that we can have faith in. But, if there are questions in science and there are gaps in the science, then it just makes this decision to open the gates to a commercial fishery that much more ludicrous, because every eye in the world is on this stock, because, everybody remembers the devastation and nobody wants to go back there. So I find it very difficult to accept the minister's decision. She flew in the face of recommendations from her own science department here, and has yet to release her justification for her decision, which is actually a requirement in the Fisheries Act that she do. So I think she hasn't done a great job here in doing her own reputation any favors. And I know in the documentation that has come out through all Newfoundland and Labrador and Patrick's reporting, for the entire Liberal caucus here in Newfoundland and Labrador to say that lifting the moratorium was a political win, I think that just proves how out of tune that entire Liberal caucus is with the people of Newfoundland and Labrador.
It seems they got the tonnage part right, according to what some folks were calling them for, including the union, but not the mechanism for to go from stewardship to commercial, because the briefing note said you should consider 20,000, which would be a political victory for NL. The NL caucus is united in going ahead with a commercial fishery.
But can I go back as well to just to add to Dewan's comment, back to the science initially. I think, if memory is right, there's a 4% difference. Like if between 13 and 18, or even 18 and 20, 22, 23, we're talking about 4% difference. Like this is not 50. Like if we had went with 25,000 tons, there'd be a 6. Like we're talking 4% difference in the impact of So yes, there's a chance it'll go down, but it's a very small chance that'll go down. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to clarify that.
And to say at 18,000 tons, for historical context, in the 1960s, yearly landings surpassed 800,000 tons.
Yeah, that was a one time, and obviously it was way too much. But yes,
obviously way, but
yes.
like just it is. It is still an interesting comparison, just to be like, well, this is, and yes, that was marching us down the road to where we ended up being, but just the numbers are still worth context. One,
I think it's important to point out too, the exploitation rate on the stock is about 2%. And I mean, that's the lowest exploitation rate on a cod stock in the world. Mm-hmm. So it's not even like we're fishing it up near the maximum where we should be when it's in the cautious zone, or even when it was in the critical zone. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's such a low level of fishing that, like Alberto said, we're dealing with such low numbers here that, a movement either way is such a low percentage that we're not putting sustainability at risk.
So then, I guess a follow-up question to that is, with these low numbers, why is the union so concerned and taking issue with a commercial offshore fishery if the numbers are so low?
It's the technologies. And like I said earlier, the technology is not selective. And in my current role with the union, I represent Area 3PS on the South Coast and Southwest Coast. And we've seen that 3PS cod stock be absolutely decimated.
Right.
We've gone from an overall TAC somewhere in the 30,000 metric tons down to what we're dealing with now. I mean, the inshore allocation's around 1,300. And there have always been concerns of the effect of the offshore fleet and what that fleet has done to that stock. And it's a battle we've been fighting for years. And we actually... There was a gentleman's agreement, I guess you can call it, that once that TAC went below 10,000 metric tons, the offshore was supposed to be removed from that fishery. It didn't happen. And harvesters will tell you, what they've seen. They blame draggers on spawning aggregations, on vulnerable parts of that population for the declines that they've seen. So, it's hard to argue against that. And we have significant concerns that we're just going to see the same old happen to northern cod. And with the work that's gone in and, the importance of northern cod to our members, because, of course, snow crab is the bread and butter, but snow crab is cyclical. And we're going to see declines again. It wasn't too long ago in 2017 that snow crab quotas were slashed and our members were in very, very hard shape. So cod is going to be a significant part of a multi-species enterprise, which is what our members are going to have to maintain to make a go in this fishery. So we don't want to hurt this stock. We want to make sure it's harvested sustainably. And obviously anybody who lived through the moratorium and had the visions of those draggers, we don't want to see those back on that vulnerable stock.
Yeah, I mean, I can picture the old news footage, right, from growing up that would get played in B-roll over and over again over the years. Alberto, like, what's changed with respect to the technology and how this is done, and can it be done in a responsible way?
Well, I think I referenced earlier in the discussion that, I mean, in Iceland and Norway, we have 50 to 60% of their cod stocks, being caught by trawl technology. We have inshore fishermen in Newfoundland that use trawl technology for shrimp. Some will even catch cod with trawls. I mean, so it's being done in other countries, and I guess the technology, the way we operate vessels, the gear itself is so different today than it was, back in the 70s and 80s. So it's being done elsewhere. It can be done here. It will be done here this year, right?
Right. Dawn?
I just wanted to make a little correction there. We do have an otter trawl fleet in the inshore fishery that hold licenses for groundfish, but that otter trawl fleet do not have access to northern cod right now and do not have an allocation and actually haven't pushed for one.
Okay. Here's a note, and folks, as you email, so the lines are open if you want to join us. We're talking about thoughts around the lifting of the cod moratorium, right? So 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can text us, 709-327-8206. Emails thesignal@cbc.ca. I will say if the email's really long, I'm probably not going to be able to read it on air, and we'll have to read it either tomorrow or in the coming days. And if you have sent an email that is longer and you want to call us, 709-722-7111. Here's a short email from Michael. Here's the question. Why is there still a gillnet fishery? Isn't drowned fish a lower quality than hook and line or trap fishery? So that's the question there.
Alberto referenced earlier that we do have a lot of harvesters who receive grade A fish out of their gill nets, and it's all about how you tend your nets. And we've worked very, very hard with harvesters to ensure that quality is first and foremost in their mind when it comes to harvesting their fish. Mm-hmm. And harvesters aren't leaving those nets a significant amount of time to the point where that fish is going to deteriorate because it doesn't do us any favors in the market and it doesn't do them any favors in their pocket. So, we do have harvesters who use hook and line, but the majority of harvesters are using gill nets, but also making sure that the soak times on those nets are very low.
And I mean, we work with with the FAW members to talk about how to properly handle cod for us, how much ice to take, making slush ice. We have we go out and meet with some of their members in the area, so we're always focused on trying to get the best possible quality.
Talk to me about Russia and Russian cod and what's changed. So obviously people know war in Ukraine, and there's a lot of fishing done by Russia. What has changed in the last few years for what you're doing?
Well, I guess for us it was significant change. I mean, we were, to supplement our supply. I mean, the Arnold's Cove plant can produce as it's sitting there today with the processing equipment we have. We can produce 25 to 30 million pounds of head-on gutted cod, and we can produce all of the cod in Newfoundland that's going to be landed this year if it was landed throughout the year. But obviously that's not the case. So we've used the Russian cod in the past to supplement our raw material supply to provide work for our people and for our customers. And Russia was our largest supplier, like 90% of our purchases were from Russia. And then when Russia invaded Ukraine, we made a decision within a week that we had to stop that because we knew it wasn't the right thing to do. So we did make a decision. We had to make a decision we had 10 containers being loaded the next day on a boat. We made a decision that night to cancel the order. And within a month, we went from, 90% of our supply being Russian to 100% of it being Norwegian. So we had no choice to do that. And, in the last couple of years, a lot of countries have stopped buying Russian fish, right? As you know, probably, it's banned in Canada, it's banned in the United States. There's sanctions or duties on it in the UK. So
Yeah.
definitely the right thing to do.
Let's go back to the phones. We've got Judith Reed on the line from Salvage. Hi.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
Yeah.
Thanks for calling. What are your thoughts on this today?
Well, my thoughts are based on about 10 years of being an international fisheries observer, working for DFO out of Halifax, and I was working from about 1987 to 93, and saw the demise of the cod fishery. And my comments really speak to the science and speak to the politics. Listen, I worked in the fish every day. I was on foreign and domestic trawlers, and I can tell you right now that nobody listened to that data. I worked every day creating huge volumes of fish data that were essentially ignored by my masters, let's say, and the politicians who run them. So my feeling is they cannot be trusted with our cod fishery. They cannot be trusted with any fishery, to tell you the absolute truth. That was based back then. So obviously this is a different decade, and there are different management practices in place now. But what has changed? If it's not science that is telling us what to do, then it should not be done. That's my basic premise.
So, Judith, I was just wondering, when you look at some of the reporting around this, and we've talked about this earlier in the hour, right? So you've got a baseline recommendation it was from DFO, apparently, for 13,000 tons. This is from a briefing note, right? Saying the same level of 2022, 2023, but then they also gave a couple of other options. And the fact that options were still given by DFO, according to this note, is that not within the science and but with added risk? Like, what do you think about that fact there of this is where the conversation is at. It's about do you go with very little risk to know for where things are at, keeping it the same, or do you heighten it a bit? And then you also have folks in the industry say, well, we thought our look at the science thinks it could be 20 to 25,000 tons.
I think that there are always going to be influences within government departments that are interested in their jobs. I think there are always going to be influences within governing parties that are influenced by elections and being reelected to their jobs. So who made the recommendation? DFO is a large corporation. There's a lot of people working there. I worked for a lot of them. Do I trust them all? No, I don't. If you talk to the Institute of Biological, the Institute in Dartmouth, they may have a different take, but they may not be allowed to speak on behalf of DFO. So there could be interference. I think that it's telling that the first recommendation was no. I think it's telling that the federal government promised no and has reneged on their promise. I think it's telling that the governing party in Newfoundland said, whoo-hoo, this is good for the province. Or maybe it's good for their re-election campaign. Those are the questions. I guess I'm a bit of a skeptic, just because I worked in this fishery. I've seen what happened to this fishery, and I live in Newfoundland half the year now, and I the devastation that it has caused this province is unbelievable. As you know, I don't have to go into that. So I guess I'm not willing to believe that the second option is the best option. I mean, the first option is always the best option.
Judith, thanks so much for calling the program.
You're so welcome.
Judith Reed there, calling from Salvage. If you would like to join this discussion, the lines are open, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can text us, 709-327-8206, or email the signal at cbc.ca. And we're asking, of course, today, the conversation for the full hour, we're asking your thoughts on the lifting of the cod moratorium. I've got two guests with me here in studio, President-elect FFAW, Dwan Street, and also Alberta Wareham, the Chief Executive of Icewater Seafoods, Inc., fish processing plant in Arnold's Cove. We also, in the lead up to the show today, we got a note from a gardening friend of the show who has thoughts on the topic today. So Mike Murray, he said, I understand the topic. It's about the cod moratorium issue, despite the fact it's outside my area of expertise. He says, it's a call-in show. I'd like to point out that nobody talks about the following science unless it's politically expedient. Open pen salmon or capelin, anybody? Two other issues that are out there, right? So, like, he's just making a point of, like, sometimes it's the politics that dictates what we talk about, and obviously, when you look at the importance of the capelin stock, especially the cod, and there have been issues with that as well in recent years, right? Wondering if you guys have any thoughts there.
There has, and of course, capelin cod are so intrinsically linked, right?
Yeah.
To capelin as the number one forage fish, of course. And the science on capelin did change a bit this year because of the changes with the with cod moving into the cautious zone. I mean, capelin is definitely a political one, and we had our own battles this year with some NGOs coming to the table and being given stakeholder status at the advisory table. So I'm sure at CBC you've seen a few of our press releases on that.
Yeah, and because because there was this was back in.
Would have been around June, I think.
Yeah, back in the late spring, you had Ocean Canada calling for a suspension of the capelin fishery, right?
Yeah, and capelin, I've often said capelin has become the new sexy in the fishery, right? Especially when it comes to NGOs and these environmental protectionist groups. I've seen so much about caplin's cultural significance to Newfoundland and the capelin role and all that. But what often gets left out is the socioeconomics of the capelin fishery. We have, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I think it's somewhere around 1,400 active capelin harvesters. And the majority aren't the big mobile gear fleets that most folks would think of when they think of the capelin fishery. I mean, these are small boat enterprises. And again, going back to what I said earlier about multi-species enterprises, every species contributes to that household, to the community. And the socioeconomic importance of the capelin fishery is pretty significant. And a lot of that gets left out of a lot of the publicity that you see about, we need to protect this culturally significant stock so our kids know what it's like to go with a cast net and pick up some capelin. It's just such a political argument, and one that we continue to fight because a lot of that imagery, of course, resonates with people who all they know of the capelin industry and the capelin stock is what they see on Middle Cove Beach. And I think the onus is on us to kind of educate the public on the importance to our communities of what that species means.
Yeah, that must be a real challenge, right? When you're working in and around the fishery and knowing how it actually works nowadays compared to whatever people's ideas are, which is sometimes based on fact, other times just based on feeling and just images from over the years of growing up here that may not have anything to do with the reality of where things are today. Because it's like to understand the fishery is really complicated.
Absolutely. And I think with the public, there's always a certain perception of the fishery. And often what they see is just, something's going on Confederation Hill again this year. And there's another protest. But, I don't really think we often do a good job communicating what those issues are and how those issues go far beyond my little fishing community or your little fishing community, and how the fishery is actually the engine of the entire province. And, without the fishery, there is no Gander, there's no Corner Brook, there's no St. John's. The money that comes out of the ocean.
There's a lot of money coming in.
A lot of money coming out of the ocean that funnels through every single part of this province. So, everybody in the province has a stake in the fishery and making sure that that fishery is going to be economically viable and it's going to continue to be vibrant.
I'd just like to add, too, as well, when I talked about the need for, the best available science on cod, we also need it for capelin.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just one species. We need the best available science for all species because it all gets factored into decision making.
It's all kind of connected out there in the ocean for which is really important. If in a time of climate change and everything else, we need to understand what's happening off our shores.
We're not in the capelin business, and I don't know what Duan would say, but I don't know if we had the best available science on capelin, Duan. I don't know.
No, absolutely not. I mean, we ran into a lot of the same issues with the same vessel breakdowns, and we've been fighting DFO on that one for a while, too, because a number of capelin surveys have been missed. And we've also been arguing that we need more offshore science on capelin because, of course, with the environmental changes that we're seeing, a lot of our harvesters are seeing massive, massive populations of capelin spawning in deep water, which aren't the traditional spawning areas.
Changing.
So things are changing, right? But it doesn't seem like DFO science is really adjusting to what harvesters are observing.
I'm going to read a text, and then we've got another caller on the line. Here's a question from the text. I know other countries don't just sell cod fillets, tongues, and cheeks. They use the cod skin and bones and everything to sell into different markets. Why aren't we doing that too? Wouldn't that help us make more money off the cod that is caught? So that's from Garrett. So I'm going to put a pin on that one, and we can revisit it. But thank you for the question. And I'll go to Jim Winter, who's on the line. Hi, Jim.
How are you?
Good, bye. Good. How you doing?
Not too bad. Just the issue about capelin. Duan said it was sexy. Well, I would say that's the new whitecoats. And the NGOs are focusing on it the same way as they did on the whitecoats, regardless of what the actual seal hunt was all about. And when you take a really close look at it, some of these NGOs that have managed to get, quote, stakeholder, unquote, acceptance by DFO, that is also the way the NGOs worked years ago on the sealing thing. And guys like Rick Smith, who was one of the architects of the ban in Europe with HIFA, has now reinvented himself as the Canadian Climate Institute. And they'll be on the they'll be on to you about how we need to ban capelin, because capelin is, as Duan said, sexy, or as I would say, whitecoat. But that's only one point. The other point I think is important to recognize is that DFO in Ottawa is a minnow. The whales are global Canada, which we used to always call foreign affairs or external affairs, the international trade departments, the PMO, and the PCO. That's who call the shots. DFO is simply a minnow. And when you wonder about something like this declaration of the end of the moratorium, that had all to do with the desires of those departments to get back to what they consider to be the absolute norm because of their involvement in international obligations. How do you interpret that? The desire to have these NAFO agreements and whatnot, which all are based on Canada giving away Canadian fish to foreign operations. Now, the quota increase was minimal. There was no justification whatsoever to end the moratorium, other than the political influence and Ottawa being what it is and DFO being the minnow. They did what they were told. It's as simple as that. And, I mean, take a look at what happened since they opened it. You can see that. But that's always been the history. I worked in Ottawa for a while, and I learned very quickly that you could almost say that many people thought DFO was a marvelous place to work. Now, I'm excluding scientists, Adam.
Yep.
I'm not coming down on the scientists here. I'm talking about the managers.
Yeah, of course.
That it was a marvelous place to work. That it just wasn't for the darn fishermen. They were the problem. And I'm convinced, in my experience of 5 years of going back and forth to Ottawa, that mentality has governed. Add to that the power of external affairs, particularly the international trade departments and the PMO, and to a smaller degree the PCO. That has been the bane of our existence in trying to create an active fishery that is beneficial to the east coast of Canada, not just Newfoundland. Newfoundland always gets talked about, but it's just as important to other parts of the Atlantic coast. And we've been victimized for years and years and years. Now, that may be a jaded view, but it is based on a certain amount of experience.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts on this, especially for this show and with all that experience. Jim, I'm going to let you go. I've got Dick Whitaker on the line I got to get to, and the folks here in studio want to just respond to what you're saying.
No problem, Adam.
So
Nice to talk to you.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Cheers.
Jim Winter, they're calling from St. John's. Duan, your thoughts there?
Sure. I just want to comment on something Jim said about DFO, if it wasn't for the Darren Fishermen. There were some really good folks at DFO who worked very hard to maintain, to first gain the respect of harvesters and to get them at the table and have a good working relationship. And, you could go down to White Hills and walk into the office and get to see somebody. And I feel like one of the biggest challenges we have right now, and one that I think over my presidency over the next 3 years, is going to be getting that relationship back, because there just seems to be such a disconnect now. And we need those doors open again. You need to be able to go speak to a human at DFO. And I just feel like the decision-making power at DFO has been removed from the local and the regional levels, and now all comes from Ottawa. And those important relationships aren't there anymore. And, if we all know the names of the folks at DFO, you could call if you had a question, and you could get those answers. And, we almost consider each other colleagues and friends, and now we don't have those relationships. So we need to really rebuild those again and to have that mutual respect from both ends.
Yeah, and that makes a difference. Yeah, Alberto.
I'd like to go back to the comment, I guess, the view about, Canada's giving the fish away. I mean, I've been going to NAFO, this will be my 15th year now. And, that may have happened in the past, but it's not happening today. I mean, I think Duan has participated in some of the NAFO discussions in recent years. And, Canada works very well within NAFO, but the days of giving the fish away, I think are gone. I mean, I don't know if you'd agree with that or not, Duan, but
no, I mean, having participated, obviously, not to the extent you have, Alberto, but being new to the table and participating in some of the negotiations. I mean, the negotiations are difficult, and we certainly don't want to be giving anything away. We want to make sure that our resources are staying here in Canada.
Dick Whitaker's on the line, which will probably be our last call, seeing there's only about couple minutes left. Hi, Mr. Whitaker. How you doing?
Oh, very good. Thank you. I still feel very sad about all these things, and I need to just remind everyone that everything is fragile at the moment, and it's to do with our climate issues and all that, and I don't need to remind anyone of that. The other thing I wanted to remind you of is that George Rose accomplished a hell of a lot with a relatively small contract with an Irish boat, a research boat. And I wonder why DFO, when it was having trouble with its own boats, didn't do the same damn thing. Because, as been noted 2 or 3 times in this conversation, we're having problems with data because of the lack of being able to do surveys and this, that, and the other. And I don't know whether this is pride or what, or I don't know, lack of flexibility, but that sort of thing can be really helpful when you need it in times like that. And that's all I want to say at the moment. I could say a lot more, but it's better I don't.
Mr. Whitaker, thank you for the call. And just as a note for you, next week here on The Signal, the full week, all 5 days, it's Climate Week, so every day will be a different climate focus. So please tune in and also give us a shout for the call-in. So thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Dick Whitaker there, calling from Portugal Cove. We're just getting down. Any final thoughts from my guest today?
I guess on Mr. Whitaker's comments. I mean, the Canadian offshore industry, the fishing industry, have made boats available to DFO. There was a little bit of delay getting a pickup on that, but it has happened in the last year or so. So survey work is being done. If DFO has issues, there are Canadian vessels in place to do the work now. And I think DFO have been reminded of that repeatedly now, and I think they'll take it up more in the future.
Message has been received, finally. Excellent. Duan, final thought?
Yeah, just on Dick's comment there about George Rose, Dr. Rose, I don't think you'll find anybody in this world that has more experience when it comes to research on northern cod than George Rose. And the fact that he's also very concerned and sounding alarm bells over the lifting of the moratorium, I think is very important. And something that I wish DFO was taking more seriously, because, DFO science has their opinion and should be listening to folks like Dr. Rose, because Northern cod has been his baby his entire career. And, obviously he shares in our concerns, and we take that very seriously.
Dwan Street, Alberta Wareham, thank you very much for this today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that is it for today's show. Thanks for listening. A little note, actually got a note. Iceberg Alley Riders, a motorcycle group, will be holding their annual Toys for Tots ride in support of the Salvation Army's Christmas Toy Drive this coming Sunday, September 15th. They'll be collecting new unwrapped, new toys, or cash donations 1 to 2 p.m. at the Canadian Tire and Kelsey Drive parking lot. Folks, if you ever have an announcement you want to get out at the end of the show, call the Signal line, leave a message, 709-576-5260. Email us, thesignal@cbc.ca. Tomorrow, the show will be live from LSPU Hall. We're going to meet the folks involved with the 9th Annual St. John's Short Play Festival. Should be a hoot. Don't miss the show. Until then, thanks for listening. Stay safe out there.